The next source of pressure on the grocery bill may not begin inside the grocery store. It may begin months earlier, in a field, before the crop is harvested, before the truck arrives, before the product reaches a warehouse, and long before a family sees the price at checkout. That pressure is fertilizer. In spring 2026, fertilizer prices rose sharply after global supply disruptions affected products moving through the Strait of Hormuz. The World Bank reported that fertilizer prices surged as those disruptions tightened supplies. Reuters reported that the Federal Trade Commission confirmed an industry-wide investigation into rising fertilizer prices on May 28, 2026. The companies named in Reuters coverage included CF Industries, Mosaic, and Nutrien. The FTC investigation does not prove wrongdoing. It means regulators were examining a sharp increase in the price of a critical farm input at a time when farmers were already dealing with pressure from fertilizer, fuel, drought, and planting costs. For most households, fertilizer is invisible. Families do not buy urea, ammonia, phosphate, or potash at the supermarket. They buy bread, cereal, fruit, vegetables, meat, milk, and packaged food. But fertilizer sits beneath much of the food system. It helps determine the cost of growing crops. Those crops feed people directly. They also feed livestock. And when the cost of growing food rises, that pressure can move through farms, processors, freight networks, wholesalers, retailers, and eventually households. That does not mean every higher grocery price is caused by fertilizer. The research does not prove that. Food prices are shaped by many forces: weather, fuel, labor, transportation, processing, retail pricing, and consumer demand. Fertilizer is one of the upstream costs that can add pressure before consumers see it. In 2026, that pressure became serious enough for farmers, global institutions, and federal regulators to track closely. Reuters reported that urea prices were up 55%, while another nitrogen fertilizer was up 33%. The World Bank projected that urea prices would rise nearly 60% in 2026, and that the broader fertilizer price index would rise by more than 30%. Those numbers matter because fertilizer is not a minor expense for many farms. It is a core input, especially for crops such as corn and wheat. When fertilizer becomes more expensive, farmers face higher costs before final market prices are known, before weather risk is resolved, and before the crop is harvested. That is where the household connection begins. A farmer pays more to grow the crop. That crop may become food directly. It may become animal feed. It may become an ingredient inside packaged foods. The cost does not move in a straight line, and it does not always appear immediately. But it can become another layer of pressure in a food system that is already expensive for many households. USDA's Economic Research Service forecast food-at-home prices to rise 3.2% in 2026. That is above the 20-year historical average of 2.6%. BLS reported that food-at-home prices were 2.7% higher year over year in May 2026. Fruits and vegetables were up 6.1% year over year. Those consumer numbers do not prove fertilizer caused the increase. They show the environment households are already living in. Grocery prices were still moving higher. At the same time, one of the hidden inputs behind food production was also rising sharply. This is the economic story. The grocery bill does not start at the checkout line. It starts in a chain of costs that most shoppers never see. The timeline begins with global disruption. In February 2026, fertilizer markets began reacting to conflict and disruption around the Strait of Hormuz. The World Bank later described fertilizer prices as surging because those disruptions tightened supplies. In March, Reuters reported that China restricted some fertilizer exports, adding another layer of supply pressure. In April, Reuters reported that USDA was speaking daily with the White House about high fertilizer prices. By May, the issue had moved from global commodity markets into U.S. regulatory attention. On May 14th, the World Bank reported that fertilizer prices had surged and projected further increases for 2026. On May 28th, Reuters reported that the FTC had confirmed an investigation into rising fertilizer prices. Then on June 22nd, Reuters reported that India-bound fertilizer ships had crossed Hormuz, easing some immediate supply concerns. That last point is important. This is not a story where every signal points in the same direction indefinitely. Some shipments resumed. Some immediate pressure eased. But the broader issue remained. Fertilizer prices had already moved sharply, and the FTC investigation was still active based on the latest Reuters reporting available in the research. The hidden system behind this is simple, but powerful. Nitrogen fertilizers, such as urea, are tied to energy markets and global trade flows. Phosphate fertilizers can depend on sulfur supply. Fertilizer has to be produced, shipped, purchased, delivered, and applied before food reaches consumers. If that chain becomes more expensive or less stable, farmers feel it first. Farmers must make decisions before the final outcome is clear. They face planting schedules. They face weather. They face fuel costs. They face fertilizer costs. And they face uncertainty about crop prices later in the year. Reuters reported that fertilizer and fuel price increases squeezed farmers during corn planting, while drought returned in parts of the U.S. plains. That combination places pressure on the production side before the food system has absorbed the result. For ordinary Americans, the effect is indirect. A household may not notice fertilizer prices. It notices the grocery receipt. It notices when the same basket costs more. It notices when produce, cereal, meat, or packaged foods take a larger share of the weekly budget. But the food system does not pass every cost through evenly or immediately. Some costs are absorbed by farmers. Some are absorbed by processors or retailers. Some are passed along later. Some are offset by other factors. That is why the wording matters. Fertilizer prices may add pressure to grocery costs, but the research does not prove a direct one-to-one increase at the checkout line. Still, the pressure is measurable enough to track. The confirmed causes in the research include Strait of Hormuz disruption, tightening fertilizer supply, China restricting some fertilizer exports, and higher fuel and fertilizer costs squeezing farmers during planting. Possible contributing factors include natural gas prices, because natural gas is a major input for nitrogen fertilizer production. Drought in the U.S. plains may also contribute to farm stress, according to Reuters. Several things remain unclear. The exact amount of grocery inflation caused directly by fertilizer is not verified. The FTC investigation had not publicly established wrongdoing in the available sources. Consumer food prices are affected by more than fertilizer alone. That is why this story should not be framed as a simple claim that fertilizer prices automatically equal higher grocery bills. The more accurate story is this: a hidden farm input rose sharply. Farmers faced higher costs. Regulators opened an investigation. Grocery prices were already rising. And the food system now has another source of pressure that could move through the chain over time. For middle-class households, this matters because budgets are already stretched across multiple categories. Groceries are not isolated from the rest of the economy. Families also pay for gas, rent, mortgages, utilities, insurance, transportation, and debt. When one category rises, people often adjust another. A higher grocery bill can mean fewer restaurant meals, delayed purchases, smaller savings, or added pressure on credit cards. That is why hidden cost chains matter. By the time a cost reaches the household, it often looks like a retail problem. But the pressure may have started much earlier. In this case, the chain begins with fertilizer supply and pricing. It moves to farm input costs. It can affect crop economics. It can move into feed costs, food processing, and retail prices. Eventually, it can reach the person standing in the aisle comparing prices. The key players each matter for a different reason. The FTC matters because it is investigating the price increase. USDA matters because it tracks agriculture and food price conditions. The World Bank matters because it monitors global commodity prices and fertilizer market risks. BLS matters because it provides official consumer inflation data. USDA ERS matters because it publishes food price forecasts. CF Industries, Mosaic, and Nutrien matter because they are major fertilizer companies named in Reuters coverage. China matters because Reuters reported export restrictions that affected global fertilizer availability. The Strait of Hormuz matters because it is a key shipping route tied to the disruption described by the World Bank. There are also different viewpoints. From the government side, the FTC investigation shows regulatory concern over the fertilizer price surge. From the farm sector side, higher fertilizer and fuel prices are squeezing planting season margins. From the commodity market side, World Bank data shows fertilizer prices rose sharply as supply routes and export flows were disrupted. From the consumer data side, BLS confirms grocery prices are already higher year over year, but does not attribute that increase specifically to fertilizer. Those distinctions matter. They keep the story grounded. The available research supports a serious economic pressure story. It does not support a claim that grocery prices will definitely spike because of fertilizer. It does not support a claim that companies did something illegal. It does not support a claim that one cause explains all grocery inflation. What it supports is a clear look at hidden costs. When a household sees a grocery bill rise, the cause is rarely one thing. It is usually a chain. Fuel, freight, labor, weather, processing, retail margins, and farm inputs can all matter. Fertilizer is one of those farm inputs. In 2026, that input became more expensive and more visible. The current status is still unresolved. The FTC investigation was active based on the latest Reuters report available in the research. Some fertilizer shipments had crossed Hormuz by June 22nd, according to Reuters. But fertilizer markets remained exposed to supply disruption and price volatility, according to the World Bank. The next signals will come from data, FTC updates, USDA food price outlooks, BLS grocery inflation reports, fertilizer prices for urea, DAP, MAP, potash, and ammonia, China's fertilizer export policy, shipping flows through the Strait of Hormuz, crop yield reports, farmer fertilizer application decisions. For now, a cost most Americans never see has moved sharply higher. Farmers are closer to that pressure than consumers are. Grocery shoppers may feel it only later, if those costs continue moving through the system. That is the hidden structure of food inflation. It is not always dramatic. It is not always immediate. It is not always caused by one event. But for households watching every receipt, delayed pressure still matters. Because the grocery bill does not begin at the register. It begins much earlier, in energy markets, shipping lanes, farm fields, fertilizer plants, and cost decisions that shape the price of food before it ever reaches the shelf.